Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Welcome to the Nikon Zf, a commentary. We'll start off with a couple 4K 30 videos taken with the Zf before we start the discussion. And then at the end, we will show some more video clips and some still images taken with this fine camera. This is Jeff Neville for Selective Imagery, and today's video is about a camera that a lot of people said they didn't want. We don't want Nikon to do this camera. Who's going to buy it? Who is it for? Why would I want it? Oh, the timing is awful. Well, to many, Nikon's timing is awful all the time. But in the end, they always surprise us, and they always come out with something that's innovative, great value for the money, and that's the bottom line. Now, obviously, they can't churn out the quantity of cameras, and to me, things shouldn't be about quantity. It should be about quality and innovation, ease of use, and the end result. And Nikon has always excelled at that. And their lenses, they don't bow to anyone when it comes to their glass. So what camera are we talking about that so many people didn't want? And now that it's out, there are more reviews on this camera than just about any camera. It's absolutely crazy. Everyone who didn't like it, either they're totally lying and all of a sudden they love it because they're doing all these videos, or Nikon has won them over. And you guys have probably already figured out what camera this is. It's the new Nikon Zf. I ordered mine from Nikon USA, and believe it or not, it sat in a box for a day and a half before I even took it out. I've been so busy doing content on my channel and going through the editing process on a lot of my images that I just didn't have the time. And I guess I've grown up, because when I was little, I would have ripped that box apart in about 10 seconds and pulled out the camera and been jumping up and down. Go a day and a half without opening up the box for a ZF, believe me, that takes some doing. But here it is. I got the sunset orange version. And I'm just gonna like hold it up to the camera here. You can get a look at it, the front view, okay, and the top view. Obviously, it's a very nice retro design. I still have the black plastic on the back screen because I did not buy a glass screen for it, at the time. I have to go look for one. And then this is I'll hold this up to my face so you can see it. This is where your headphone jack is, and your microphone jack, your HDMI, and your USB port. And then here's the bottom. And as you can see, I'm going to hold this up. Above the tripod thread, you see a hole there? Well, that hole is like a locating pin for the small rig grip accessory. See the pin sticking out? Okay, that goes right into that hole on the bottom of the camera. So I guess Small Rig and Nikon must have talked to each other. So what comes with this camera? Okay, if you don't buy it with a kit lens, it's going to be the camera body. You're going to have what they call the BS1 accessory hot shoe cover, just a plastic slide-in piece, and it goes in there pretty tight. The DK33 rubber eye cup is here. And in case you wanted to put one of those hoodmans on, I did, that I use on my Z9. It's a little big for a camera this size, and I think I'm just going to stick with what's on the camera now, to be honest with you. You get the BF-N1 body cap. You get the ENEL15C lithium-ion rechargeable battery with the little plastic cover, terminal cover. You also get the, let's see here, let me find it, the UC-E25 USB cable. We'll talk about that more in a second. You get the camera strap, the warranty card, very important, and you get multiple copies of the manual in different user's manual in different languages. I highly recommend you download the PDF file for the user's manual, and more importantly, you download the ZF reference manual. That's where all the meat and potatoes are, folks. So you really want to know your camera inside and out, know every little thing about it. You're not going to get it out of that manual, which is just basically initial setup and setting your clock and your time zone and stuff like that. Some very basic information. You want to go through the reference manual, and that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. Now, let's see. For a camera strap, I'm not going to use the one that comes with the camera, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to use my thinner Peak Design slide right camera strap, which sells for about $60. And the thing with the USB charging cable is one of my pet peeves, I hate to say it, with the camera, is it doesn't come with a charger. So it assumes you have one from another Nikon purchase, and if you want the charger, you can buy the optional EH-8P AC adapter for $60 at B&H, and that'll also, when you use that USB cable, it'll provide constant power to your camera if you're doing long videos, and when the camera's off, it'll be charging the battery. Now, only ENEL15C and the previous generation 15B batteries can be charged while it's inside the camera body. If you have the older ENEL15A batteries, which I probably have about 7 or 8 of from my D850 days, those batteries can be used. You're not going to get as many shots out of them. They don't have the same milliamp hour rating as the new ones, but they will functionally work. And those you have to use the old style MH-25A charger. That plugs in the wall. Okay. This will also charge the new batteries. I've charged the new batteries in this with no problem. This battery takes about 2 hours and 40 minutes to charge. And What's confusing is there's another option listed in the documentation, an EH-7P AC adapter, which is $60. I couldn't find it at B&H. Nikon USA sells it, and it has a USB cable hanging off of it as well. And the ZF manual claims that it also provides power to the camera when you're shooting, and that contradicts a statement when you're on the Nikon USA website and you look at that particular adapter. It basically says that it does not provide power to the camera. It's really just for charging the battery when the switch is in the off position. So I don't know which is right. It would seem weird to me that you're selling two different part numbers that do exactly the same thing. So just, be a little cautious about that. Make a phone call to whoever if you want to buy that EH-7P for some reason versus the EH-8P that uses the cable that came with the camera. I would just get that, to be honest with you. Or buy one of these older guys. And I'm an older guy, so I like the older stuff. And you get, obviously, the joy of having a trendy camera here. So my initial thoughts: beautiful retro design. You can customize it with some different leather color selections. That's $100 upcharge if it's anything other than black. Your camera stores can only sell the black model. The colored ones you have to order through Nikon USA, and it's an extra $100. Now the switches are very snappy. You hear them here rotating the shutter speed and the ISO knobs. On-off switch. Everything's nice and clicky. The only thing I noticed that's interesting is the switch that's located underneath your shutter speed dial that allows you to go instantaneously into black and white mode and then go in still mode and video mode. That has a different throw. It's like the distance of travel between the black and white, going from black and white to photo mode, is very snappy, and it's a certain distance. But then when you go from the photo mode to the video mode, it's a much shorter distance, and it doesn't really seem to be that snappy when it slides over into the video mode. Nothing wrong with that. It just has a different feel, and I wish it had that same tension that you get when you go from black and white to photo. The buttons are well placed on the camera. Okay, and they're going to look familiar to anyone who owns a Nikon body. Now, to move your focus point, you have to use this portion around the OK button, okay, to go up, down, left, right. You don't have the small joystick control like you have on a Z8 or a Z9. Okay, they removed that. All right, so you can either use the touchscreen option, and you can program the touchscreen so that you can move the focus point via the touchscreen, or like I said, you just go and you use this pad here and go up, down, left, right. The buttons. The quality is adequate, but I'll be honest with you, it doesn't have the same feel. Like, they don't push in with enough resistance, as much resistance as you have like on a Z8 or a Z9. So they're definitely not the same switches, or don't have the same tension on the contact mechanism. So they're functionally good, but there is a difference between, obviously, and there should be, between a $4,500 or $5,500 camera and a $2,000 camera. The small grip, I'll hold the camera this way, you can see it, okay. The small grip is better than no grip, okay. I've got, old cameras behind me. I got an FM3A, and, that doesn't have any bump at all. That's just totally flat across the front. It does help a lot. And I find that if you use the camera with a 24-to-120 lens or smaller, the standard grip is more. This standard grip is more than adequate for lenses that you would typically be using for portraits or street photography, that type of thing. You have no need to buy the bigger grip, but if you do, you have it. Now, I'm going to put different lenses on this camera just so you can get an idea of how lenses look on it. We'll start off with the 40mm f2. Okay. Nice and small. Nice and small. Now, when I have lenses like this, I typically take my fingers and lay them on my palm, and the camera rests on my fingers and this part below my thumb. And then my other two fingers are out here to adjust the focus manually if I want to. The placement on your hand is natural. Okay. This is your function button, the only function button that you have on the camera. And when you place your hands on here naturally, your ring finger is perfect for activating that function button. Now originally I'm there, gee, it would have been nice if they had two function buttons on the front. But realistically, to get a grip on the camera, your middle finger needs to be nowhere near a button. Okay? And it allows you to grip the camera better, and there really was no way that would make sense to put another button on the front, although it would have been nice to have another button somewhere else. So that's with the 40. Now we'll move on. Bear with me here. I got a very small desk and a lot of stuff on it right now that you can't see in the image. Okay, here we go. 24-to-120. Perfect. Okay. And obviously, your hands are farther out, so you can adjust the focus, the zoom functionality. So you don't really need the big grip for a lens like this. This still works good. Okay. Now we'll move up. We'll keep going up and up and up and up. Bear with me. All this stuff, like I said, I don't have an assistant. Army of one. I'll take the lens hood off here. Here's the 100 to 400. And you're like, wow, okay, that really works okay with this camera? Absolutely. Now, some people rotate the foot so it's over on the top. I won't do that. I don't do that personally. I like to have it low like it is now, like I'm putting it on a tripod, because I could support my hand under it. It takes a lot of weight. The camera is not handling any of the weight. The foot's in the palm of my hand. I got my fingers here to rotate the zoom. Okay, I can adjust the focus. I can use another finger on the other side of the camera to rotate the control ring. I could do everything comfortably and still have my fingers where I want them. And obviously, every time I go to a longer lens, my hand is further away from the body of the camera to support the lens. Now, at the 100 to 400 range, this is where the grip for some would be adequate. For others, it's kind of pushing it a little bit for this size of a lens. So I'm going to put on the small rig grip. So this will take me a second or two to do. Now, once you put this grip on, okay, quite different. Quite different. Makes a big difference with a lens like this, in my opinion, although I could get away with a little while without this grip on here, but to me, when I put this 100 to 400 on, I want the other grip. And when you look at the bottom of the grip, obviously, you're now set up for Arca Swiss. You can mount this on a tripod. You can use, a tool to loosen this up, or you can lift up the edge here and turn it by hand. And you have a couple 1/4-20 threaded areas to attach things to. You have a slot here on the side where you can put a peak design. One of those features they have for the peak design, like the wrist strap, and attach it. Okay, or something else. And it kind of like protects and firms up the base of the camera as well, because the base plate isn't super thick. It is metal, but it's not super thick. So this gives it a little extra protection too. So that's an added bonus. Now we're gonna continue to grow here. Everybody's saying, "What? What are you doing?" But I think it's important for people to see how crazy you could get. And you can use this camera for bird photography. Here is the 180 to 600 on this lens. Definitely want the grip for this. Same deal though. I keep the foot down. I have it partially in the palm of my hand. I can access function buttons. Okay, I could turn the zoom. I could get at the control ring with another finger on the other with my finger on either side of this lens. I could use my thumb or what have you. I've got the function buttons. I'm all set. This is probably the largest lens that I would put on this camera. And obviously, you could put a 500 PF. That doesn't weigh much of anything. You could put the probably the let's see. Well, any of the zooms, I'd say I just wouldn't go past this 180 to 600. A friend put an 800 on this, said it worked fine, and I'm sure it works fine. But this is the largest I would go, and then when you get into it, like lenses like this that have an area where you can attach hold it up here, attachment point for a strap. Take your camera strap and hook it up to the lens. Don't put it on the body. Don't put the stress on the camera mount. Okay, this lens is heavy for a small camera like this. It's not like it's a Z9. So I would still recommend putting the strap on these longer lenses. Give me a second to put this stuff away. I'm going to slap the 40mm back on. I don't need to be waving around a big lens when I'm just talking about the camera. Now, the camera, it's very solid. It has a bit of weight to it, doesn't feel plasticky. It doesn't feel cheap. At this price point, I think it's built, it's excellent for its price point. That's my opinion. You have the fully articulating screen. Okay, it swings out. You can rotate it, close the back, and not even know that you have a screen back there. Okay, so this is going to be an attractive option, well, for people that do B-roll, and content creators, vloggers, they've been asking for this for a while, and now they have a fully articulated screen. Now, some may be bummed out that the camera uses a micro SD card. I will open up the back. You have access to the battery, and try to get the. You have access to the battery and to the card slots. The cards are in there underneath that yellow catch mechanism for the battery. Hard to see. SD card, micro SD card is in there. You put the cards in first, by the way, before you put the battery in. So some will be disappointed that, you know, you only have, you know, the micro SD and the SD card. And the way I look at it is a lot of cameras in this price point only have one SD card. You don't have two card slots. So I would get a micro SD card, put it in, and basically leave it in. It is easy to get the SD card out of the camera. A lot easier than I thought it would be. Where it's a pain to get the SD card out is if you take it out of the camera to put it in your computer and you're using one of these adapters. See the slot on the bottom? That's where you slide in the micro SD card. Try pulling that card out afterwards. It's not like it's a spring-loaded release. It is a pain in the neck to get that card out. And it's so easy to drop that card and not be able to find it. It's ridiculous. Now, like I said, some will be disappointed by the one function button on the camera. I wish they put two on the body, not on the front. I see where that wouldn't work out, but one somewhere else would be nice. And the mini HDMI, when you go to the side, you've got, let me open that up. You got the mini HDMI port. Many people don't like that. You've got the rubberized cover for your USB connection. And unlike, you know, an older SLR camera, you don't have the flash sync port on the camera body. And unfortunately, you don't have the 10-pin connector, which would have been nice so that you could use wireless features to screw into it or whatever, wireless shutter release. Instead, you have a thread in the button for the shutter release that would use like an old-fashioned type of cable release. I got to see what Nikon has for that and pick up one of those. So those are a few nitpicky things that would bother some people. Now, a few reminders for people. The ZF has some features on it that aren't even on the Z9. Okay, they're in the Z8, but not the Z9. You have the skin softening mode. You have the portrait impression balance adjustments that you can make. Now, if you so eventually those will migrate into the Z9, and obviously there's some features in the Z9 that people hope flow down into the Z8. And how many of those may end up in the ZF, I don't know. Because this is a camera where people are confused about what is it for, who is it for, and we'll get into that later. Now, if you want to bracket your photos, you don't have the buttons on here, and you don't have the big LCD display. You have a small LCD display right here, and that's just to show your f-stop value. That's all that shows you. So you can't adjust your bracketing from buttons or levers on the camera body. Okay, you have to do that within the photo shooting menu. And what I did was I added bracketing to the My Menu screen. And then I programmed the button. What I did was I programmed my video button. So when I'm shooting stills, if I hit the video button, the My Menu screen pops up, and I can get access to everything I put in there, whatever I want to get to quickly. Also, you can customize your iMenu. and move things around and change some things. But what's nice about the My Menu feature is it's not limited as to how many items I put in there. I could basically create my own customized menu system if I want to. Now, one thing that none of the other reviewers that I have seen or listened to, and I've probably watched 30 or more videos on this camera, as soon as it came out and got announced, I watched them like crazy. They don't talk about the fact that there's no photo banks. Now, that's a hit or a miss by a lot of people. Some absolutely hate them. I'm not one that hates them. Okay, photo banks, you have photo bank, and you have custom banks as well. Okay, and you had up to 4. You had A, B, C, D. You could rename them. I had one set up for sports and birds, sports/birds. I had another one set up for landscape, one for portraits, and one for macro. And what's nice is I could customize those menus, the photo shooting menu and the custom menu, and have it so, the one that was labeled sports birds, I would have, that would be, A, let's say shooting bank A or custom menu A. I would put them both on A. They'd be named, sports/birds. And I'd have it optimized for how I want features set up when I'm doing that subject matter. Then I could go down to landscape, and it would adjust both those menu systems for what I want for landscape. Now, yes, you do have a photo shooting bank, you have a custom bank, but you cannot save multiple iterations of it for different genres of photography. And no one has mentioned that. And I think that's a shame that they got rid of that. I really, really do. I really like that a lot. Now, it forces you to get creative because you only have one function button, okay? Forces you to get creative on how you program some of these other buttons. I mean, you can program your OK button to do different things. You could program your display button to do different things, okay? But what you can do with each button varies. I mean, you may have only 2 or 3 things that you could do with a certain button. On another button, you might be able to do 10 different things, depending on what you want. And of course, you could still program when you put on a bigger lens that has, that has function buttons on it. Okay. You could still go in the menu, the controls feature, and program what those function buttons do. So if you have lenses with function buttons, that gives you a little versatility. I set my camera up. I copied a lot of stuff I had on my Z9 where I could. Other areas I had to decide what I wanted to do. And I'll be tweaking this thing for a month probably till I get it the way I want. Right now, when I push on the shutter button halfway, I've got the wide area small is what's in there by default. I programmed my AEL, AFL button on the back over here. I push that. It's an autofocus mode, and it's wide area large. And I programmed the function 1 button for 3D tracking so that I can use this for birding. I could switch between wide area large to get the bird initially, and then switch over to 3D tracking and take the picture. And then when I'm doing everything else, I'm going to start out with the small area large, for, whether it be landscape, street photography, people, or what have you. I have it set for subject detect, set for automatic for now. But if I know I'm going to shoot birds, I'll go in and I'll force it to be on animal subject detection. To be able to pick it up and just shoot and get something right away, I have it in the auto mode right now. So there's a lot of things that you're going to tweak and change as you use this camera and get used to it. Now, I also recommend common settings such as your image size, FX mode, DX mode, your autofocus mode, your subject detect mode, need to be handy in your I menu or in your My menu screen. You don't want to have to do a deep dive into the menu system on the camera to change some of the more common things that you may want to adjust. What I do like is when you set up this camera, you could choose where your video files go. You could either put them on the SD card or on the micro SD card. I chose to put them on the SD card, and I set up the micro SD as an overflow. Now, some people they shoot RAW and JPEG, so they'll put RAW on the SD, and more than likely, and put the JPEGs on the micro SD. So there's a lot of different combinations of things you could do. All depends on your use case, what you're used to, what you personally like. No, there's no right or wrong here. I recommend putting your ISO settings that's in your shooting menu into the My menu so that you could turn off auto ISO quickly. I like to use auto ISO when I'm doing bird photography. Now, just so you know, when you're using auto ISO, it doesn't matter where your ISO button is set, because this doesn't do anything. It has no effect when you're in auto ISO. Auto ISO takes full control. Now, it's important to know when you look at the ISO dial, it goes from ISO 100 to 51,200, or one click past that. Not sure what that value would be, but it's important to know, and you guys would know this, is all the camera brands, Nikon's not an exception, you usually have a extended ISO ranges. You have like a extended low, so that you could shoot below ISO 100. You have one or two high settings that you can choose from. Well, when you're using this dial, you can only set what's on the dial. If you want to go lower or higher, then you have to put this dial into the mode called C. There's a C number on here, and then that wheel is locked. You have to push the release button to turn the knob again, but you want it in the C position because that's the only way that you can get into those higher range ISOs or those lower range ISOs, which you have to change within the menu system. So if you're not in C, you cannot make changes in the menu system. It'll go based on what you have this set for. Let's see. And like I said, C mode is the only way you can change your ISO in the photo shooting menu or in the video shooting menu, or get into those extended ranges. Frames per second. Another thing that everybody does not accurately state what the frames per second for this camera is. No one has stated it correctly. Until you read the actual reference manual, you find all the different conditions and what is what. So you can program your continuous low anywhere from 1 to 7 frames per second. And from what I can tell, that applies to both the RAW file and the JPEG file. If you go to continuous high, that's 8.2 frames per second RAW or 10 frames per second JPEG. If you go to extended or high extended, then it's 11 frames per second RAW and 15 frames per second JPEG. There's a C30 option. The C30 option is JPEG only. It's kind of like on the Z9, you could do, 30, 60, 120. All those higher frame rates are all JPEG only. And if you use silent mode, frame per second, which tries to quiet down the noise from shooting faster bursts, then it does slow down your frames per second rate a little bit, slightly. And there's a table in the reference guide that'll tell you all the different variations, but I gave you the meat and potatoes part of it. The pre-release capture mode, which is on this camera, will only work in the C30 mode, which is 30 frames per second, JPEG only. That's not any different than the Z9. You have to, it's for JPEGs only. You can't do it in RAW. Something that people have asked for, but that hasn't happened yet. And as stated earlier, you have a switch that you could switch directly into a black and white mode. And that's associated with your picture controls. And picture controls, bake in data for JPEG files. And they also adjust what you would see when you're looking at your rear display, when you're chimping, looking at your pictures. Okay? But there are 3 different monochrome modes. Okay? They have monochrome, flat monochrome, and deep tone monochrome. So if you want to decide which one of those you want to use when you flip this switch to black and white. Now that's a little tricky. If you want to decide what is used when you flip that switch to black and white, what you have to do is flip the switch to black and white mode, go into your picture control menu, and then you can go in and select the monochrome mode that you want. And then it will be in that state when you flip the switch to black and white. If you try to do it when you're in shooting mode and you go into the picture mode and you change it to monochrome, then when you go and you pick up your camera, you're looking at monochrome image. Okay, I personally have my camera set for vivid most of the time, but I don't want it where I change it to monochrome and now it's monochrome and I got to go back to change it to vivid. So the only way where you have that separation, where you can have one picture control feature when you're shooting stills and another picture control feature when you're in black and white, is you have to be in that black and white setting and then go into the picture controls and then pick the monochrome setting that you want. So that's a tip that I think will help you. Let's see. Compatible Nikon flash units. They talk about Nikon flashes that are part of the creative lighting system. It's in the reference guide. They list all their flashes and they have detailed information as to what features for what flash works with this camera. They do not talk about third-party flashes that work with the Zf. You'd probably have to consult with an authorized Nikon dealer and say, what'll work with this camera, and see what they say. So to see the information on the flashes, go to page 789 of the Zf reference guide, and that's where you start. Now, by default, because the Z lenses don't have aperture rings on them, your sub-command dial on the front right here is used to change your shutter speed. So you move your finger, rotate that back and forth, and that changes your f-stop. The larger grip kind of does get in the way a little bit of rotating this. It makes it a little bit harder, so that's the only negative about putting a big grip on. A little harder to rotate for your f-stops. But that's the only way you can change your f-stops. Your shutter speed dial, obviously, you rotate to change your shutter speed. Now, if you want to have the camera set up similar to how you use a Z6 or a Z7, a Z8, or a Z9, where your rear dial can control your shutter speed, because maybe you're doing something and you're like, I got to be able to change my f-stop and my shutter speed quickly. I don't want to be, flipping switches and moving knobs on the top, even though that's what makes this a great camera in my opinion. But what you do is there is a blue lettered stamping on the shutter speed that says 1/3 step. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Okay, right there. It says 1/3 step. So if I go and I set that, it locks the knob. I can't turn it. I have to push in the release button to get out of that mode. But when you're in that 1/3 step, it automatically assigns your shutter speeds to the rear dial. So now you have f-stops on the front, shutter speeds on the back. So you want to make it act like it's a more modern Z6 II or Z7 II or what have you, then that's how you do it. You just go to that 1/3 step, and all your controls are set via the wheels. So many are going to say, well, why did Selective Imagery, why did Jeffrey Neville buy this camera? You got a Z9, man. Why didn't you just go out and buy a Z8? Well, thought about it a lot. Almost thought about buying a refurb Z9. Then the more I thought about it, I've invested a fair amount of money in lenses. And I says, I really can't afford a $4,500 body. I don't know when the Z6 III or Z7 III is coming out, and that's going to be at a totally different price point from this. And I'm like, what do I want the camera for? Well, I'm an old fart. I'm an old timer. Okay, I've got old rangefinder cameras, old SLR cameras, the FM3A, which you could see some of the things that were stolen off of that camera to go on this. And I just thought, this is just so cool. It's a fun camera. It's a feel good camera. Okay, it's not necessarily the ideal camera for a bird photographer, but it can do it. There's no doubt it can do it. It's nice and small for street photography, travel, weddings, landscapes. Now, some may say, well, landscapes, it doesn't have enough resolution. Well, it does have the pixel shift feature. You can capture up to 32 images and create a 96 megapixel file. That's enough resolution for you. Although, that feature, to me, is a little gimmicky, and it, conditions have to be just perfect for you to use it, but it is there. And you can still get a decent sized print from a 24.5 megapixel camera anyway for a landscape shot. Most people aren't doing prints anyway anymore. They're just sharing everything on Instagram and Facebook or YouTube. Now, I plan on using it for bee footage, for my YouTube channel, for nature and bird photography when using that 100 to 400 zoom, which I got here somewhere. Okay. Or smaller zooms. I'd have no issue using the 180 to 600, okay? But that wouldn't be my normal thing. I think the 1 to 4 or the 24 to 120, 24 to 120 is going to live on this camera. It's an emergency backup if my Z9 has to be sent out for cleaning or service. It's going to be great in low light, okay? 24.5 megapixels, BSI, CMOS, sensor. Can't complain about that. I mean, some people, myself included, would have wished it was like a 33 megapixel sensor, but it didn't defray me from purchasing the camera. It has very competitive video features. It does 4K 30, 10-bit, oversampled from 6K. It'll do 4K 60, cropped. It can do N-Log internally. Okay, so it has some very substantial video features for a camera in this price point. It's great is you can put a old manual focus lens on this camera, and it'll actually have a focus point that'll do eye detection for you and help you focus on your subject. There's no other Nikon camera that can do that. It has focus point stabilization. What that means is your image stabilization was usually focused on the more central area of your viewfinder. And if your focus point was near the edges of your sensor, it wasn't necessarily quite as effective. Well, now the focus point stabilization optimizes the stabilization wherever your focus point is. And you have IBIS up to 8 stops, which is a Nikon first. Okay, it has the best image stabilization of any Nikon camera, even better than the flagships. So, in a $2,000 body. And I mentioned pickle, that's funny. Pickle shift, new feature, pixel shift. So who is this camera for? Well, to me, anyone that wants to slow down a little bit with their photography, enjoy using a retro design, anybody who wants a small but powerful camera with an X-Speed 7 processor right from the Z8 and the Z9, along with autofocus modes and subject detection options from those cameras, it makes it a very versatile camera. You want an affordable backup camera to one of your Z8 or your Z9, or you just want a second body. You know, like I said, I'll have the 24-120 with me when I go to the park a lot on this body, because when I get 50 or 100 birds that are close to the road, I'm too close to get a group shot anyway with a 500 PF or 800 PF on my camera body on my Z9. I can take this out with the 24-120. I could fit them all on the picture, in the image, and I'm going to get a great shot. Okay, I can't do that right now. Now I can. And although it's not going to apply to me per se, someone that wants to look cool and have a camera that can be customized, different color leatherette, can make a statement visually as well as functionally with this camera. I don't think I look cool, do I? Do I look cool? Maybe if I put my Nikon hat on while I hold this, I would look cool. In conclusion, even though I found a few things to nitpick on, which everybody's going to do, force a habit, right? But I'm trying to be honest with you, my observations, okay? I've been shooting Nikon for decades, and I love Nikon. But I've had a lot of other cameras as well, and I have a lot of other cameras as well. And I have nothing against other brands. I mean, I think competition is good. I think it gives you choices. It gives you something to compare against. And what it does is competition drives all the camera manufacturers to not sit on their laurels and not continuously improve their product. If you don't continuously improve your product, and Nikon's done a great job doing that with firmware upgrades. I mean, the Z9, from the time it came out to what it has in it now, it's like another camera. And you didn't pay for another camera. You got all the firmware upgrades for free. So they've been doing a great job. But I'm impressed by what this camera can do. The price point is phenomenal. I'm very happy to add it to my bag. And like I said, it's so funny how so many people said we don't want this camera. And granted, it's probably not going to sell as much as a Z6 III would or a Z7 III. But I think it's going to do a bang-up job. And a lot of people who were critics and whining and moaning and crying have kind of sucked it up a little bit. And now they're having to admit, you know what, it is a pretty cool camera. And hopefully we get the, as I've said, either on my live streams or on my regular channel, I expect, without any inside information, that if there is going to be a Z6 III and a Z7 III, they typically come out at the same time or within a month or two of each other, and I think that's going to happen again. Hopefully, be announced in the spring, next spring, and be able to ship in their next fiscal year, starting April 1st. And that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and like I say, enjoy life, capture some of it whether you're shooting with a ZF or a Z9 or an A7R4 or a Fuji or an Olympus, doesn't matter. It's important that you get out there, have a good time, capture some images that mean something to you, and you're the only one that you have to make happy. Okay, if somebody else likes what you do, that's, for me, I call that bonus dollars. Somebody likes what I do, that's a bonus. I have to like what I do. So here's a series of photos taken with the ZF. This is from my second floor porch on the front of the house, just shooting across the neighbor's house in a loop here. And then we're going to switch to some beach scenes, and I'm just going to talk as we get into those. Any video clips that you see are going to be in 4K 30, and this is at Myrtle Beach State Park, these beach scenes. And eventually we'll get into some nature shots. And of course, a big part of my fooling around with this camera is to see if you can really use it for wildlife photography. And we'll get into what my answer is when we get to some of those photographs. But this is the underneath of the pier, and here's a short video clip of a stool, I'm going to call it a stool pigeon. I tried to make it talk, but it wouldn't do it. So you can enjoy the video here of the pigeon. Have a few more still images coming up here. This is from another pier. There's some birds in that picture if you look close enough. And I got a picture of this one flower amongst these this plant life on the beach, laying on the beach. And now we're going to get into some bird photography at the park and a quick video of a ruddy duck, 4K 30 as I mentioned. And so far my impressions, and this was all taken with the ZF with the 100 to 400 zoom, and I'll tell you, 400 really just isn't long enough. I was at 400 the whole time, basically today, at least where the birds were. I mean, I didn't have a need to back off on the zoom at all. But these pictures are nice and sharp. You know, color's great. Minimum editing. Any editing I did was really some crops in some cases. The camera can capture bird in flight photos fine for the birds that I did catch in flight on this day, and very pleased. I used the 3D tracking mode. Very pleased for how the camera worked. Now, I would not recommend this camera for someone saying, oh, I just shoot wildlife, I'm going to get a ZF. No, I think it falls into that category that I talked about in the earlier videos, where it's a fine backup camera. Like I said, I'm going to use it for video. I'm going to use it for putting on my 24 to 120 for group shots. It's great for bird portraiture, because the problem is you don't have a big enough sensor to do any cropping, any significant cropping. And in some cases, like on those small birds, basically I cropped it to where it was going to be suitable for an 8x12 image at 250 dots per inch. And if you use the DX crop, you're basically, that's where it puts you. If you go into DX mode, large size, it's for a 300 dot per inch 8x12 image. If you're in full frame mode, you could get a 16 by 24 image at 250 dots per inch, which is fine. This is my my old neighbor's cat that I took care of while he was on a trip. But basically, I think for the wildlife, you really have to crop by changing your lenses, by using longer lenses. Okay, so the 100 and 400 wasn't long enough. I'm going to take some pictures on Thursday in the morning, and I'll talk about it a little bit during the photo review when we get done reviewing our photos on Saturday's live stream. And I'm going to try it with the 500 PF and see how things go with that. But I think you're limited. It's good for some wildlife photography, but not if that's the only genre that you shoot. I don't think you would be satisfied overall, because the sensor is just at 24.5 megapixels. There's no room for cropping, so you have to then go to longer glass, and then how long a glass you're going to put on the camera. The 1:4 is comfortable on it. I know the 500 will be comfortable on it. I've put the 180 to 600. That's a little bit of a stretch. Anything beyond that, I probably would not do personally. But that's kind of where I sit with that. So everyone have a good time. Get out there and get some great shots. Till next time, take care.